Hey guys, welcome to this episode of The Suspense is Killing Me. I'm Lucas Marino, your host, and today I am honored to have someone I've been really looking forward to talking to, Miss Antonia Rachel Ward. How are you, Antonia?
Hi, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. And we are on opposite sides of the pond, right? I'm on the East Coast of the United States and you're over in the UK. So we're having this conversation essentially at two very different times of day for us. And I'm very grateful that you made the time later in your day to meet. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
And you are a self-proclaimed and let's just say world renowned, world recognized author of horror, gothic, and speculative fiction. I am really interested in talking about Attack of the Killer Tumbleweeds for several reasons, which we'll get into. And we'll also talk about Dreamscapes, which is coming up in October, correct?
That's right, yeah.
Excellent. But true to form for the show, we want to get to know you a little bit more as both a reader and a writer before we dive into the conversations about the books. And so I'll start with the pretty fairly obvious question. What's your life like outside of writing?
Busy. So as well as my own writing, I run Ghost Orchid Press, which is a little small publisher. I have a job alongside that. I'm an accountant and I have a little girl. So yeah, it's always pretty full on.
I had no idea you were an accountant. That's very interesting. Do you do that full time, part time?
Part time at the minute. Yeah.
Part time. Very cool. Do you do that as a small business, like your own small business, or do you work with a firm? Or
Oh yeah, I work for a firm. So
excellent. Very
yeah.
cool. Um, I have a theory about accountants. I was an engineer, so numbers games, and I run across a lot of accountants when I was getting early into my education in engineering because people tend to like go either into the money or away from the money when it comes to the math stuff. And I always felt like I struggled a bit with math because I had a teacher who chipped away at my confidence when I was younger
Yeah.
in math. It really had nothing to do with that. I was fine. I just didn't realize it until I probably got to my graduate level, which is like a little late to gain your confidence in math. But um, I had a friend whose father was an accountant, and he said that you had to love accounting to get into accounting because it was one of those jobs where you were fully immersed in your work. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And the only way I could relate to that was as a musician or as a writer at the
Yeah.
time. So,
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's good to just do something that's completely different um, than writing. At
yes.
least it's it's a change. So
Yeah, and it keeps your mind a bit fresh, right? It also gives you
yeah.
something to look forward to. I find that in my small business work, I own several small businesses in the training space. I own training businesses, and often what I'm doing is coaching or teaching other people how to do what we do. And I find that it makes this great sense of urgency and desire to go back. Like I can't wait to get into my work in progress. I can't go wait to get into that script that I've been writing. And every writer I've talked to who doesn't have that says, "Dude, it's so awesome that you have that balance because
Yeah.
it does give you this kind of sense of wonder and excitement when you get back to your work." So that's cool. Very cool. So we have a mom, we have an accountant, we have owner of a press, we have an author. You're a very busy person. I love it.
Yeah.
So you obviously we listed the types of fiction that you have been writing so far. Where did you find your love for suspenseful fiction? Where did that come from? Was it something you found on your own, or were you introduced to it as a young child?
God, yeah, I think I remember when I was a teenager, I got into the point horror novels, which a lot of girls my age will know very well. So I think that's probably when I started reading horror. And then like I didn't really stick with the genre very much after that. I read a lot of gothic. Gothic was really my thing. And I studied at university and I did my dissertation on gothic novels and all that sort of thing. So I didn't really get back into modern horror until probably about 3 years ago.
Wow.
Um, and I made some writing friends, and they were writing horror, and they were recommending books to me, and I was like, like I had no idea what was out there. You know how it is when you go into the bookshop and all you see is Stephen King.
Right.
And then I got introduced to all these other authors, and I was like, well, this is the stuff I've been looking for all this time, you know. So
Nice. Very
yeah,
cool.
I feel like gone back to something that was once very familiar to me back when I used to read those point horror books and stuff. You know,
Hmm.
I kind of
So,
lost, came back to it.
so were you a teenager when you found those books?
Yeah, yeah, would have been about 13 or something, I think.
Oh, wow. I think about my daughter when I hear you say that because she's 12 and I think she found her first hints of horror and kind of suspenseful fiction right around age 11. And I'll tell you what, I didn't anticipate that a television series would kind of thrust her over the edge into the book world, but Stranger Things actually got her super excited about more scary stuff. You know, up
Mm.
until then she didn't have something that she could kind of relate to with her friends, and they kind of all coalesced around Stranger Things. And I think it was also cool for her that it was like the first time I let her like really kind of push the envelope a little bit with language and other things because she was just getting to the age where it was okay to start doing those things. She could understand when I said, you know, what was acceptable to hear but not say and those types of things. So she was, all right, I got it, Daddy. And then she was like on fire. She's like, can I watch this? Can I watch that? Can I do? I'm like, why don't you read this instead? Like, why don't you do a little bit of reading? And she fell in love with Darcy Coates. So she's a big Darcy
Oh,
Coates
right,
fan.
yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, yeah, and a couple of other things. But it was funny because you had mentioned Stephen King, and that was kind of what pulled me into the horror world was Stephen King. And I don't even remember which book it was. It was right around Misery, so it may have been a little bit before that. But I remember seeing Pet Cemetery and being terrified and being like, "This is cool. I'm digging this." And just kind of falling in love with the thought of being scared, but in a safe way, and it was pretty exciting. So I love to hear that. Very cool. Now, did that continue for you? Like, did you stay engaged with fiction, or did you fall away for a while and come back?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've always been a big reader, and I did English literature at university. So yeah, I feel like I've always read a lot and written a lot.
Right. And was that like a double major? Were you doing that while you were studying accounting, or was it
I
one?
no, I was very much a literature girl for ages. I did my master's degree in that as well, and I worked in a bookshop. And the accounting is something that I've done a bit more recently when I realised that I needed something a little bit more that's going to earn me a bit more money, basically.
Right. And steady, right?
Mm,
Yeah, a little bit
yeah.
more consistent. Fill the gaps fairly quickly with that kind of more steady income. Yeah, I completely feel that. A lot of the people I end up coaching on the in my small business work, that's one of the bigger obstacles to overcome is the wave of entrepreneurship and
Mm.
kind of like the ups and downs of the fun flows and the work and all the things. So I found that when I moved back over to being more serious about writing, that I kind of took for granted that I'd had that experience as an entrepreneur, and realized that there were a lot of people that were experiencing that as a writer. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes me feel a little bit better. I thought I was all alone over there in my little world.
Yeah.
Deal-
Yeah, I was quite lucky. I spent some time working for a very small business and kind of learnt a lot about just generally building a business. I mean, I was doing the account stuff, but I was doing a bit of everything else as well. So it was a really good way to learn about entrepreneurship and just building a business from the ground up before I started Ghost Orchid Press as
Very
well.
cool. Now I hear of like running a press because I don't run a press, but I've worked with small presses. But I hear that running a small press is I mean, it's a full time job, and that it can be very taxing, and it can basically become like a fully engulfed small business kind of environment if you're not careful.
Yeah, yeah, it's I was doing it full time for a couple of years, but unfortunately, the thing about small presses is you don't really make a lot of money, so doing it part time now.
I gotcha. I gotcha. And I respect that. That's very cool. So we talked a little bit before we came on the air about writing as teens, and then we were kind of reminiscing a little bit about the stuff we had written as teenagers. So did you start writing around the same time as you started reading fiction, or was there, can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Do you know what? The first story I remember writing, I think I was about 5. So I think I've written stories for as long as I can remember pretty much. But I remember sort of taking it more seriously when I was about 13, and I was writing stories for just, schoolwork, and one of my teachers came to me and said, "Look, this is really good. It could get published, you know." Obviously, that story never did, but yeah, that set me off on the path of, "Oh, I could do that." Which
Excellent.
a lot of people say, I don't know if you've ever seen, like, the meme or whatever that goes around that's where a teacher comes up and says that to a student, and it says, "And thus her life is effectively ruined." But it's a lot harder than you imagine.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, there's some irony in that, right? It's that's pretty good. And so you held on to that inspiration, obviously through your adult education. That's really amazing. Did you go to the university to study literature with hopes of getting into a certain field like journalism or academia? Was there some type of post education goal there that you were considering at the time?
Um, I mainly like I wanted to be a writer,
Mhm.
and it was like, you know, my family was like, "Well, you have to go and do something a bit more practical than just sit around being a writer." So I chose to study English and creative writing being my minor. And I didn't stick with the creative writing studying it. Um, I preferred just to stick with the English literature. But yeah, I didn't really have much of a plan beyond that. It
Sure.
was more just for my own interest, really.
Yeah. Well, that's actually I asked that question because I was in similar situation as you were. I wanted to go to school to study classic literature, and it was probably the least most common thing for kids my age in the area I was growing up in to say something like that. It was not a typical path for people I grew up around. I grew up around a lot of like blue collar, hardworking, traditional, old school kind of New York Italian family, and everybody was a mechanic or is a mechanic. Everyone's a tradesman. It's like you work 3 jobs. And I'm like, I want to go study classic lit, and they were like, okay, sure, dude. What are you gonna do with that? And part of it was just I don't want to say ignorant and a bad and use it as a bad term. They just weren't aware of what types of opportunities exist with that. And I've actually kind of felt like, well, yeah, maybe it's not realistic. And I was too young to really have confidence to overcome that. So I never studied classic lit in college. I actually ended up joining the service and being in the military for 21 and a half years instead. And it wasn't until I came out of that that I was like, okay, now I have the financial stability, the motivation, the ability to dive back into something I left over 20 years ago. And I still, to this day, aspire to gain a little bit of that education in classic lit. And I just have to get to a point where I can go back. I did my doctorate in engineering, so I was a little exhausted from school at that point. But yeah, you did something I was hoping to be able to do. So congratulations. I'm very proud of your accomplishment.
Thank you. I
I
hope
think
you
it's
can
really cool.
go back and do your studies at some point.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. So so now, I mean, you are a writer. I noted that you had said you really wanted to be a writer. Congratulations. Here you are. You're a writer. I've read your books. I know you're real. They're amazing. And while I read other writers, I'm constantly thinking about how those people are working. Where are they writing? What are their inspirations? And basic things go through my head like, where are they sitting while they're writing this? Like, what kind of environment are they in? And I always find that fascinating for as a reader to know that about the writers that I enjoy when I enjoy their work. So, can you tell me a little bit about like your typical writing environment? What's that like?
It's not glamorous. It's just a cramped little office, basically. Yeah, I don't have a lot of space. I don't have a very big house, so
That's cool. There's nothing wrong with that.
I've just got my little desk and my little space, little
Do you have
corner.
like music playing?
Yes, always. I love,
Right.
yeah. I know some people say they can't write with music on, but I have to have it on all the time.
Yeah, me
Can't
too.
stand silence.
I have to have something going. Do you have like a particular type of music you like to listen to, or a particular artist that you kind of prefer when you're writing certain types of work?
Um, I like quite a lot of different things, but at the moment, I'm quite liking sort of electronica and sort of dance music, really. I've gone
Mhm.
back to my 90s roots, listening to a lot of trip hop and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. That might explain a little bit about the cover to Dreamscape.
Yeah, maybe. It's a good
I
point.
love that. So, have you kind of changed your music styles with your writing? Do they go hand in hand, or does one influence the other? Do you care? Is that like even like a ridiculous question to ask?
I like to make playlists for every, work in progress.
Mm,
So, yeah, I do have little playlists for every book.
nice. So now you've really piqued my interest on the musical inspiration behind Attack of the Killer Tumbleweeds, because I know you have a playlist now for that book, and I've got to know, is it like full of like, well, we'll talk about the story, so they'll be able to understand this if they haven't read the book. Which, by the way, if you haven't read it, you have to read that story. It's so much fun, but it's like, it's so well put together. I was a little worried at first. I was like, okay, you got to be careful how you treat the 50s mobster kind of Vegas vibe, and you did it perfectly. You nailed it. Yeah, so I'm guessing that that list probably had Dean Martin
Yeah.
and Frank Sinatra and maybe
Yeah.
some Tony Bennett, or some Rat Pack type music on it.
Yeah, definitely, Dean Martin was, like, one of my main ones on there.
Yes.
I think that I found a recording of a show that he did in Vegas, and that was, one of my inspirations for the character Dean Valentine, who's basically inspired by Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra and little bits that I'd read about them.
I love that. And so Attack of the Killer Tumbleweeds, I mean, I've already kind of alluded to it, was this beautiful little novel. I love the cover. It's so artistic and fun. I actually showed it to someone the other day who I could tell they were kind of like hesitantly like, dude, don't refer a book to me, because I was like, hey, you've got to look at this book. And they're like, oh, yeah, no, that'd be great. Yeah, sure. A book in your phone. And I pull that up and they go, oh, that cover is amazing. I said, yeah, go get it. You're going to love this story. And it was all predicated around this kind of supernatural events that occurred outside of Las Vegas and then end up in Las Vegas. And you treated the characters wonderfully. I love the way you developed the story, the whole myth of the desert type of vibe with the 50s kind of mix was perfect. So could you expand a little bit? I don't want to be I don't want to spoil it. I'm not going to talk for your book. Obviously, you wrote it. So you want to talk a little bit about the storyline and the plot without giving too much away?
Yeah, okay. So basically, I come up with this idea. It was basically me trying to come up with the zaniest monster I could think of, and somehow I thought of this idea of killer tumbleweeds that are like razor sharp, can tear you apart. So the story is essentially it starts off with this mobster named Jimmy who discovers something crashed in the desert, and uh, and yeah, so
Insanity ensues.
Insanity ensues, yeah, basically. We've got Dean Valentine, who is the sort of lounge lizard singer. He's a Hollywood star, a bit washed up, but sort of past his prime, and Glitter, who is a showgirl who works with him, secretly in love with him. And they sort of team up with these two newlyweds who've come to Vegas on their honeymoon when the town gets swamped by these killer tumbleweeds.
I love it. By the way, Glitter was my favorite.
Yeah, me too, to be honest.
That's great. People that have read it are gone. They're either agreeing with us or they're arguing into their listening device about whether Glitter was better than X or Y or Z. I thought Glitter was great because I thought you picked a perfect stage name. I thought her the way you weaved her into the story, because I was worried at first when you first introduced her that she would become like a less of a prominent role in the story. I was like, oh, she's cool. I hope she plays a prominent role, and then she does. So I was really excited to see that. She was my favorite. Thank you for Glitter. What's kind of, I mean, so this is a, okay, writer to writer question, right? You have all these ideas all the time. We're always like usually have these like lists of things we want to write about. Some are a little bit more attractive to us than others at certain periods in time. But obviously, Attack of the Killer Tumbleweeds kind of just jumps out at you. And you said, I've got to write this book. And what made that the book that you decided to move forward with at that particular time? Was there was there an open call that inspired you, or did it just really kind of call out to you when you came up with the idea?
I actually randomly watched the trailer for the 1958 version of the Blob, and I just went, oh, I want to write something like that. Just something super fun with that kind of comfy 50s vibe to it. And originally, it was a short story which got published in an anthology, and I just couldn't stop thinking about Glitter and Co. And I just thought I want to expand that. So yeah, it's an expanded version of that original short story, although it did change quite a bit, obviously, as things do in the writing. But yeah, I think I went back and watched the whole of the Blob for inspiration. And I wanted to take that kind of lovely 50s comfy feeling, but just put a bit of a spin on it, just a bit of a modern lens on it, and really focus on the female characters who typically wouldn't have got as much of a role. Like you said, like Glitter gets a prominent role. That was really important to me. And it was also really important to me that the two female characters, Glitter and Cindy Lou, that their relationship was central to the book, really. And the way their relationship grows was what I really wanted to focus on the most.
I love that. I mean, because they really do carry the story. I mean, especially in the second half of the book, right? It's where they kind of everyone's out there surviving at this point to keep it kind of clean for the podcast. No spoilers, but those two obviously become kind of interdependent, right? They kind of become dependent on each other to a certain point, and they kind of save the day. So for them, I'll just say that. I thought you did something very calculated and masterful with this story. So prepare yourself for nice words. You could have gone egregiously bad. This is what I was worried about when I picked up the book. I'm like, okay, this could be done really well, or this could be like really bad, right? Because there's so much cheese just waiting there, right? So much cheesiness associated with that time period. It's so easy to kind of get it wrong, and to do it in a way that doesn't really engage people today. And I thought you did a wonderful job of treating the fun of that time period and the magic of that time period with respect, and also with that B movie flair fun without making it cheesy or cheap. You actually made it really nice and fun. I felt like I was there, and I felt like I could relate to the characters, and the book moved along at a great pace. So I never got tired of the taste of the book. It was good. It was great. I mean, I really enjoyed the story. And again, as an Italian American kind of guy, that's kind of our like. I mean, there's a lot of people that associate that time period and that culture with our, our time in America in the 50s. And I thought, wow, she did a really good job of like some of these little intricate details about like the organized crime relationships in Vegas without going into like a deep dive in organized crime in Vegas, right? Like just the relationships between the characters and who's made and who's dangerous and who's not, and the way they interact on the street outside of the one location with the one bad guy. All that was like, I was like, good, she got it, right? Because it could have been very, very, it could have been executed in a different way, and it would have been slightly less cool. You nailed the cool. You got it really good. Very,
I'm really glad it worked. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I think it's something that I feel kind of nervous about because obviously I'm just looking in on the American culture from an outside perspective and a perspective that's been mostly informed by movies. Let's be honest. And I kind of think that's a fun perspective, but also is a little bit like, am I am I getting stuff right here, or am I just sort of am I just making things up? I don't know. So it is nice to know.
So in this story, I think you treat Dean's relationship with women in a very good way because you show that he's not the greatest guy, but you also show kind of like the way that culture thought at the time and the way they approach certain topics and relationships. You did it very, very well. I kind of really respected the way you treated that because I thought, well, this is another opportunity where you could accidentally mix decades and
Yeah,
perspectives, and you kind of nailed it. Like that's the way those guys kind of were.
yeah. I think when writing a historical period, it's really important to me to ask myself why do I want to write about this particular period in history, and to try and get the attitudes accurate as I can from my what I know about it, but also sort of to try and say something about it from a modern perspective. And I think that's different than just going in there with a sort of modern attitude and giving your historical characters modern attitudes, or making them mouthpieces for your modern attitudes. I like to try and do something a bit more subtle and a bit more, hopefully, more realistic to the period, um, which I also try to do in Marionette. And it's difficult because when people in that time period have different attitudes than we do now, it can, you know, it can be quite a fine line to try and write those kind of things. You don't want to offend, you don't want to go too far and offend your readers, and you don't want it to be unrealistic. So, it's a balancing act.
Well, I thought you pulled it off very well in the book. So kudos. I respect the way you managed that. And I thought it was really accurate because it made me think back to some of the older gentlemen in my life that were around at that time, at that age, and the way they kind of interacted with people. And there were some people that were better than others and some that were worse than others, just like every other time period. But their underlying wiring kind of stands, right? And the way people responded to different types of relationships, even back then, were different than they are today. And I thought you did a really good job of kind of balancing that while also showing that there were some insufficiencies there that definitely needed to be addressed with him and his character. So very good. So I've got to ask a, writerish question here. It's a little deeper, but is there a theme besides just awesome B movie fun that you kind of aspired to convey in the book?
Um, I think in as much as there's a theme, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier in that when I talked about sort of wanting to make the female characters central to this, what would have typically been a fairly male-centric kind of style of story. And without, again, wanting to spoil anything, I wanted those characters to have depth and their own background that comes out through the story. And I think Glitter and Cindy Lou, they start out, they look like opposites. And I've heard readers say, oh, I thought they were going to be at each other's throats, you know. And it was really important to me to bring those two together. And show that although they started out seeming very different, they had similar kind of concerns, I guess. I don't want to give too much away about the
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
It's really hard, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you queued that up well, but you also kind of foreshadow a little bit earlier in Glitter's character that she's got a good side that, you know, that might come out a little bit more.
Yeah, I think I was trying to say something about sort of, I guess, the focus on the nuclear family and the kind of pressures that are on these women to be a certain way, to sort of play a certain role. Cindy Lou being the newlywed and Glitter being, I guess, the kind of Scarlet Woman in comparison. You know, she's kind of the outsider to all that because she's never had the chance to be married or have a family, you know. So that's the deeper theme that I think I was trying to explore.
Well, I think you picked a masterful time to capture it because I don't know that that was, at least here in the US, I don't know if there was a stronger time for that than the 1950s, right? Like, I mean, the the ideal image of the ideal life at that point was that nuclear family, post-war, everything's rosy, husband, wife, 2.5 kids, suburban home. That was like ingrained in the culture so heavily in the 50s. So I think you did a, you know, again, very time relevant, a great time to point out that balance between those two women in that period of time. I thought it was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. So that's cool because, you know, that's something I couldn't necessarily pull off in a book because I don't have the same perspective, and I really appreciate being able to read that from you. I thought it was really cool. So I guess the last question about Attack of the Killer Tumbleweeds before we start talking about Dreamscape, which I'm really excited to hear about, is what did you learn about yourself while writing Attack of the Killer Tumbleweeds?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's always interesting to look back at, you know, something that you've written because to me, I feel like everything that I write, you know, I sort of look back and I think I can see what I was trying to work out in my own head there, but yeah, I don't know. So I have to answer that.
Did you learn anything different about your writing process or the way you approach a story? Or I mean, because I feel like every time I go through the process of writing, I learn a little something different each time. I've written more nonfiction pieces to publish than fiction at this point, but that, by the way, that number will be flipped by the end of the year. But I've learned a lot on each project, just something a little different. So I just was curious as a, you know, if you learned anything different about the way you write one book versus the other, or like one style versus the other in that process.
I mean, one thing I tried when I was writing that one was editing backwards, which was helpful because I've always found, you know, once you get towards the end of a draft, it gets exhausting.
Yeah.
And so with Tumbleweeds, I thought, okay, I'll edit it from the end and get that sort of fresh eyes on the end part first before I'm worn out. And that's a strategy that I am definitely bringing into later novels and
Wow.
things.
So you start with the last chapter
Yeah,
and
once I've been through it a couple of times, when I'm sort of on sort of draft 3 or so,
right.
start working backwards.
That's amazing. I have to do it chapter at a time while I'm writing. So like I have to like write a chapter, then edit that chapter and then move to the next one. Cause by the time I get through the book, like you said, I'm kind of tired and my brain's a little scattered and it's like it doesn't matter like if I wait a couple days and come back or not, like my it's just it feels like you're trying to eat like this monster thing,
Yeah,
you know,
it
because
gets exhausting towards the end.
yes, it really does. And you and I both have experience as self-publishing, so I think there's a little bit in some cases. I'm not going to say absolutes, but in some cases, there's a little bit more of that in self-publishing. I do feel like my partner in crime is always my developmental slash line editor because I usually have the same person do both for me,
Mm.
and they save me from myself often with that part of the book phase. It's like my nonfiction editor is her name is Karen Hunsinger, and she's kind of like a mom figure to me. So like I'll have to send her a message in the morning and be like, yell at me. I need you to yell at me about doing this thing. And she'll be like, where's my draft? I think it's all right. All right, I'll go get it. Because if you don't yell at me, I'm not opening that document today. I just can't drive myself to do it. So very good. So let's transition a little bit away from Attack of the Killer Tumbleweeds and toward your upcoming work in Dreamscape. So I'm fascinated to hear more about the story because it is a very big departure from both the Marionette and Attack of the Killer Tumbleweeds. So tell me about Dreamscape. Where did the idea come from? What's the premise behind the book?
Um, well, I actually wrote Dreamscape maybe nearly 10 years ago. Um, so for me, it's it's actually a lot older than the other two books. Put it aside for quite a while, picked it up again more recently. So the story is basically about a girl called Ren. It's set in sort of a near future period where there is this massive online virtual world which was so addictive that it ended up being made illegal. People were using it too much. It was messing with their heads. It was making them do crazy things. So it's been made illegal, and Ren's little sister ends up lost in there. She's kind of in a coma. She's in this virtual world, and Ren has to go in and try and rescue her. Um, so I think the idea for that kind of came from was inspired by some games I used to play, video
Sweet.
games. Um, there was one called The Longest Journey, which was this idea of shifting between worlds, and I think that just really got into my head, and I and it inspired this idea of going between the real world and this kind of fantastical virtual world. So
Excellent. So you wrote that 10 years. Did you write the full draft manuscript 10 years ago and you just went back and pulled it up and updated it, or was it partially developed 10 years ago and you kind of set it down?
I think I've been picking it up and putting it down over quite a while. But yeah, it kind of got put aside. My little girl is 8 now, and it kind of got put aside when she was born, as these things tend to do.
Hmm.
So yeah, once she was a bit older, I was able to get back into it.
Now, did you find you were more motivated and in a better position to finish the book by waiting? I mean, sometimes I feel like we get a great idea, but it's just not the right time for that book, right? Whether it be whatever the influences are that prevent us from finishing. It's also not something we're fighting to finish right now, right? Like we're not like, nope, all things be damned, I'm going to finish this book. Sometimes I feel like the story is telling us like it's okay to put me down and come back. It might
Yeah.
be better, right? Like, and did you feel like when you came back, you were in a better position to finish a better book now than you would have been at the time?
Yeah, I think sometimes just getting fresh eyes on it, like, once you've taken a really good amount of time away and you can come back and it's almost, like, totally new to you, that really helps, to be able to see not just to see what needs improving about it, but actually, to be honest, what's good about it. I think when I was really in the thick of writing it, I was wanting to change huge things all the time. After I set it aside and come back to it years later, I was like, "This is actually perfectly good how it is. It's really good how it is." I'm really proud of what I did there, and, realized that I could, really just polish it up, and
Right.
I didn't need to be worrying about these huge changes I was always wanting to make, so it helped me get some perspective on that.
Excellent. Yeah, that's so cool. I recently dug up some stuff I had written when I was younger, and I was like hiding in my closet reading it because like I was like I felt a little like guilty that I was reading this stuff. Like I think I was supposed to be like helping my kids get ready for something or whatever, and I like came across and I'm like, oh, but look at this! I haven't seen these in years, and I start looking through them and I'm like laughing. But some of it I was like, wow, these short stories that I was writing, some of these are perfect for some of the some of the magazines or anthologies that I see soliciting for work out there. And I'm like, maybe I could pull some of these up and clean them up. Obviously, peel some of the teenage layer off of them because a lot of them I wrote when I was in my teens. But there's really good root there. One of them's actually a children's book. It's not written like a children's book, but it's a children's book. And so you inspire me by telling this story about Dreamscape. That maybe it is okay for me to polish it up a bit, give it
Yeah,
a give it a little look. You know.
yeah, definitely get it out, get it into the world.
Excellent. Well, so I'll ask this next question, similar to the one I asked about Attack of the Killer Tumbleweeds with the theme, but I have to be careful because the book's not out in the world yet. So, can we discuss what the theme is of the book that you maybe built into it without ruining it for the whole world, or should we know?
Yeah, I think I think this is actually an easier one to discuss without
Okay.
spoiling anything. Um, because really, I think although it feels to me like a fairly light-hearted book, I think there were some fairly dark themes underneath it. And the main one being the wish to escape from the world
Hmm.
and escape into this dream world. There's a character in there whose name is Eric Dacre, and he's a rock star. I just wrote him because I just wanted to write a really cool rock star character. But he's very troubled, and he uses the dreamscape all the time. He's known to be sort of really addicted to it. So it's kind of, it's a parallel to sort of drug addiction or
Hmm.
online gaming addiction or anything that kind of takes you out of yourself and away from the world, and needing to find a way to get back and actually connect with people in the real world, and find your way back to your life. And um I guess that's what it's really about. So
I love that. Um, yeah, those anytime I read a book where they address addiction or I mean it really resonates with me because I was surrounded by addiction for a large majority of my life and know what that world is like and what it feels like and like that pull. It's just a very it's a deep theme, right? It's a really deep topic. I'm also a little hesitant to write about that sometimes just because I know that you have to treat it, you have to be very careful with it, right? I think that's really cool. It's brave of you that you can take that on and make that one of the core themes of the book and build that whole world around it because it is something that people feel pretty deeply about when they've had that in their life. And there is something magical, even when it's good or bad, about being pulled away from reality for a while. And
yeah, I mean, I think in it, a sort of slightly less serious version of that would just be, writing itself, stepping into your sort of
Mm-hmm.
imaginary world of writing, and you know, so I guess it's also a lot about creativity. There's a lot of creative characters in that book, actually. There's the rock star, there's an artist, there's a dancer.
Wait,
So
dancer's not named Glitter though, right?
no, but but I do seem to write a lot about performers for some reason.
Yeah.
Always got
Yeah, now
performers.
that you're saying that, I'm like, wait a minute.
There's a lot
Is
of dancers. Yeah.
is there something to that? Is there something that draws you to writing about performers?
I don't know. Somebody pointed it out to me once, and I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know why that is. I mean, I used to dance myself, so
Ah,
it's kind of a world that I know. But as to why, I always seem compelled to write about performers. I can't quite work out why that is. I just think it's really interesting how sort of they get to have two different personalities, their on stage personality and their off stage personality, and I guess they're always hiding something in some way
mhm.
in order to perform, so it makes for interesting characters, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the more interesting characters I ever met in my life were fellow performers. I was a musician for several years before I joined the service. That was kind of like what I was going to leave and go be a musician, studio recording, session guitarists. You could call me up and I go play a live show to fill in for somebody when they were sick or hurt or whatever, or fired sometimes. But I did that for 2 years, and man, what a wild group of personalities that you meet in performers. Some of them are so subdued, and then others. I mean, it's almost like the extremes, right? Like I was. I've been told I'm ambiverted, but I always felt introverted as a child. I was kind of a little quieter, a little more chill. I was perfectly content just being in my room with a book or my guitar. You could just lock me away forever, and I was happy. But the greatest thrill I ever experienced is playing live music. So at the same time, it's like, well, there's a little bit of a trade-off here, right? Like you may develop your craft in private, but you really experience this rush when you perform, even if you're terrified, you know? And I think for you were a dancer, you probably felt that as well. There's something about that is not to kind of pound on the addiction um, uh, theme, but there's something addictive about that
Yeah,
feeling of performing.
yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, definitely. It's a yeah, it's a rush to be up on stage.
I love it. Now my body can't do what it used to do. So now I have to remind myself, like, yeah, you had a whole lot of fun when you were younger doing that, but I'm not sure I could have as much fun doing that anymore because I'm a little more limited now. Um, but I'd probably be better at it now, to be honest with you, because like back then it was just like throw caution to the wind, have fun. Now I'd probably sound a little bit better. Okay, so with the book release coming in October, do you have an actual release date identified, or is it still in development?
It's going to be towards the end of October.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, the second half of October.
And is that is going to be printed by Ghost Orchid?
Yeah, technically, yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
I try and keep my own things a little bit separate.
Okay.
Um, so I tend to just promote my own stuff kind of as a separate thing to Ghost Orchid Press, but it's all just me. So
Right.
I'm the only person working for Ghost Orchid Press, so it's all kind of the same thing, really.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it tells that story when you go to file your taxes, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's not a separate entity. It's me. I'll pay all the taxes. Fine.
Yeah.
So can we jump into a little bit about Ghost Orchid, because I find it fascinating that you're running and owning this small press. I think it's such a fantastic way to give back to other writers, to open opportunities, to explore other areas of our industry. I think it's just wonderful. I'm so tempted to do it, but I'm also reminded daily, sorry, about how much capacity I have to take on anything else. So I'm tentatively stepping into the waters, but I know that the obligation to support other people on that press is pretty significant, and that's where take that very seriously. So can you talk a little bit about what's it like having a small press and what's going on with Ghost Orchid these days?
Yeah, so I think I've been doing this for about 2.5 years, just over that. We've done a bunch of anthologies, and this year releasing 4 novels. We've released 2 novels and a collection already this year, and our big anthology, which was Les Petits Morts, which was released in June. So we've got 2 more novels coming, which are Dark Woods, Deep Water by Elena Donato and Winter Harvest by Ioana Papadopoulou. So those are both dark fantasy, mythology-based kind of books, which is it's really nice. It was not something I necessarily sought out to find, but that just happened to catch my eye. To have these two sort of mythology-based stories actually written by people who live in those countries and know those mythologies inside out,
Wow.
which was a really nice thing to find. So I'm looking forward to those 2 books coming out in September and November, respectively.
Very cool. And you've been doing this for 2.5 years now, you said?
Yeah.
Excellent. So do you maintain like a certain publication like tempo or schedule each year from year to year, or is each year treated kind of individually?
It just depends on what I can take on. I mean, this time last year, I ran the submission call for the novels and had just taken on these 4 novels, and then I got a job, which previously I'd been working on this full time. So I'd taken on like a full time schedule for the press, and then I'd taken on a new job as well. So I haven't taken on anything new since then because there has been enough to be getting on with. And it was really important to me to focus my energies on what I had already signed up, and not to shortchange these authors by continuing to sign new things up and sort of burn myself out on that.
Right.
So
Ah, I love
all
it.
my attention is on these books right now.
Excellent. Excellent. You know what, I commend you on that, because there's a lot of people that would be drawn to open the door wider, right? To try and generate more flow. And it's honestly, it's not the right strategy. I think what you're doing is actually admirable, and it's great because the authors that you do have, like you said, they feel like, they're being handled and treated well, and the relationships are strong when you have that kind of relationship. So kudos to you. I think that's really cool that you decided to do that.
Yeah. So hopefully next year I'll be able to jump in with something new. But yeah, at the moment, that's what we're doing. And I think it's a lot of pressure releasing novels because it's somebody's baby. And I want to get it right, and I want to get as many eyes on these as possible. So
Yeah, good for you. That's excellent. So I guess naturally you're reading a lot of the authors that you publish, obviously, but outside of the Ghost Orchid Press world, what authors are you reading these days that kind of have your eye?
so I, I, I kind of made a bit of a resolution at the beginning of this year, New Year's reading resolution, that I wanted to try and read sort of as many non-American, non-British authors as I could find. I particularly wanted to try and find authors from other continents. And it's been really interesting because it's quite challenging
Wow.
to find, for example, to find African authors to read. It's quite hard to find anything that's out there, and it is quite eye-opening to when you realize, I could put my hand on any number of books that are set in New York, but for the entire continent of Africa, only like 2.
Wow.
So I've been reading a lot of horror in translation, just read Out by Natsuo Kirino, a Japanese author. That was an amazing book that's just shot up to the top of my pile of favorite books ever.
And that's out.
It's called Out. Yeah,
Excellent.
that one's excellent. And yeah, I've been enjoying Mariana Enriquez as well. Her short story collection, Things We Lost in the Fire, that really blew me away. That was amazing.
I'm over here diligently writing these down.
Mm.
Because I have, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about, you know, being a reader than a writer. I am just, I mean, I'm not saying anything most of the audience is probably in the same shoes I am, and I'm over here acting like it's something unique, but I can't get enough. Like if it wasn't for ebooks, I'd be completely destroyed financially right
Yeah, me too.
now. Because I'd have nowhere to put all my stuff. All my income would be gone. You said it's Things We Lost in the Fire.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
excellent.
Excellent. See, you're coming with all the great recommendations. I haven't read either of those yet, so I'll pick those up. I'm right in the middle of reading. I almost said eating. I'm right in the middle of reading Ghost Eaters.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I am really enjoying that book.
I haven't read that one yet.
Clay Chapman. Well, first of all, I mean, Clay's just a huge personality. So, uh, what a great story. I mean, it touches a lot on the escape from reality, the themes of addiction and escape and all the things. But it's also set like the story's set like 35 minutes from my house in Richmond,
Oh,
Virginia.
cool.
And so I'm reading all this and I'm like, damn it. Like my wife literally lived her whole young life right where this book is taking place. So I'm over there sharing with her. And then I'm sending Clay messages on Twitter like, dude, I can't believe you brought me to a house in Hopewell. It's like nothing good happens in Hopewell. Um, so it's been kind of surreal reading Clay's Ghost Eaters, and I'm probably late to the game on that one. And I know you said you hadn't read it yet, but for people I guess in this region, I should probably have read it by now. But I also have been reading a lot of Anya Alborn's.
Oh yeah, that I need to read something of hers. She's on my list.
Well, I really enjoyed Within These Walls. That was really good. My wife read Brother, and she said that one was really disturbing. So she's read both of them. She's like, yeah, Within These Walls was fun. And then she read Brother, and she's like, dude, that ending just destroyed me. I'm like, okay. So you might want to, I don't know if you're like jump into the Destroy Me waters first or ease into the Within These Walls waters first. But yeah, pick your poison. There's some two recommendations there. And I'm also reading well, it hasn't been released yet, but Red Lego is also a local author here in Virginia. She's in Virginia Beach.
Oh yeah, I know Red. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm reading her upcoming release now, which I'm going to butcher the beginning of this. So I'm going to look it up real quick so I can sound somewhat intelligent. It's Red, don't kill me. Impulses. That's the word. I was like, I had necrotic heart, but I couldn't remember the word impulses. Impulses of a necrotic heart. And I'm really enjoying that.
Awesome. Yeah, that looks really cool. I love the cover for that.
Yeah. Did you know that she does her illustrations?
I didn't.
I didn't either. I was like, who did these illustrations? I'm like, I'm on the beach reading these stories, which were fun beach reads. And I'm flipping through and I'm like, dude, she did her own illustrations. That's really cool. I'm not that talented. So congrats, Red. You're awesome. And her book comes out, Impulses of a Necrotic Heart come out September 29th. So really cool, really good book. I'm really enjoying it. Nice bite-sized short stories, and they've been fun so far. So I sent her a little fan mail the other day. Said these are great. Well, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing. You've inspired me now to try and tackle the same challenge, to read more authors off of the, I guess you could say, traditional English producing countries of the North American continent and in the UK. So I'm going to have to get that private list of books from you when you can generate it.
Yeah.
All the great things you're finding. I'm really interested in exploring some more work coming out of Asia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, very good stuff. So, well, with that, I would love to thank you so much for joining me today. I've been looking forward to this conversation for so long. I've been really enjoying your work. I was identifying this interview a month ago as something I really just couldn't wait to get to. So thank you so much for being willing to come on the podcast and share your experience with these wonderful stories with the readers and the listeners, and for spending some time with me, because honestly, it's I'm just as much a fan of you as a reader as I am as a fellow writer. So it's been great to have you on, Antonia.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and in true fashion, I have to ask, where can everyone find you? What can they do to identify the greatness of Antonia Rachel Ward?
I have a website, which is antoniarachelward.com, and Instagram at Antonia Rachel Ward. And my Twitter, or whatever we're calling it these days, is at Antonia Rachel W1. So,
Excellent. And are you on Threads yet?
I am. I'm
Yeah.
not using it very much yet. I'm a bit overwhelmed by all these different social medias at the moment, but
Yeah, me too. I was on there today. I think it was yeah, I think it was this morning. Just finding other horror writers and just thinking to myself, I'm glad I couldn't just jump onto Blue Sky, because how could I possibly manage all these platforms?
yeah, I'm on Blue
Instagram.
Sky as well, but yeah, not I haven't
Well,
quite got into these ones yet.
yeah, I mean, it's a lot when you think about promoting, right? Because
Yeah.
we're basically have to maintain and build and nurture and love our audience so that we can share our work with them, and they can share their work with us, and we can have that great relationship that we really seek to have with readers and fellow writers. And the more platforms there are demanding that energy, the harder it gets for both the reader and the writer to make that connection and make it stick. So I'm with you. I'm kind of I haven't publicly admitted this yet, but I've been really watching other people like Sadie Hartman, Mother Horror, and
Mhm.
saying, "Oh, look, she like published her place where she's doing certain things. Like I'll be doing this on Instagram, I'll be doing this on Threads, and I'll be doing frequent updates or occasional updates on X or Twitter, whatever we want to call it these days." And so I really admire that she kind of published that, because it's given me some inspiration as a fellow writer trying to maintain my sanity.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, well, go
Music
check her out.
intention, yeah.
Yeah, get out there, find Antonia on these platforms. Antonia, you've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for meeting with me today, and I can't wait to get you back on the show soon to talk about Dreamscapes. I have pre-ordered, and I am waiting patiently.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, guys, we'll see you in the next episode.